Hello and welcome back to another video in the Complete Web Dev series. In this chapter we are building a content management system using object-oriented programming. In the last video we created our database class and set up our connection using a singleton pattern. And in this video we're going to actually make it usable to use our database to actually make queries and things like that. So let's go ahead and jump right in. If you are enjoying the series, please comment, like, subscribe, leave me some comments down below. Let me know if you're confused or if it's all going well. I know this series is a little bit confusing, but you can watch the videos as many times as you want and try things out on your own. I will say to make sure you're trying this on your own, you're typing along and you're trying to understand the logic by reading it from top to bottom. All right, so I'm going to go over to my screen now and let's just go ahead and I'm going to type clear here and get branch, and we are going to create the 14th video branch right here because this is our 14th video in this series, or in this chapter rather. So to do that, get checkout -b flag to create a new branch, and we're going to do v14, hit enter, and then I'm going to do a get push dash set dash upstream, and then that's going to be origin v14. All right, so now I've created a new branch on GitHub. So you guys, when we leave off this video, I'm going to go ahead and push everything that we do in this video to this branch. So if you're lost or your code doesn't work, go ahead and check it out on my branch on the GitHub repo, and you can find that in the comments below. So with that, let's go ahead and jump over to our code here, and we're going to work in our database right here. So the first thing that we want to do underneath our get instance class here is we want to have a way to actually run or execute SQL queries. So we're going to start off pretty basic here. So create a public function here, and this is going to be a function that requires that the database is instantiated, so it's not going to be static. It is just going to be a regular public method, and we're going to call this we could call it exec. Let's call it execute. There we go. And it's going to take two parameters. The first parameter is going to be our SQL statement that we want to do, and then we're going to have a second param called binds, and the binds will be like our bound strings, anything that the user passes in, so that we don't end up with SQL injection. All right, so now that we have this set up like this, let's go back to our blog controller, and what we want to do is kind of show you what this is going to do. Let's insert, let's do an insert. So we'll set up SQL, and then we're going to type in our insert command right here. And first, let's go to the browser and open a new tab and just type localhost /php myadmin, and this will give us access to our databases. So go ahead and find CMS. Now we already created these tables once before, and let's look, let's add something to our articles table. So click on articles and then click on structure, and you can see what the structure of this is. Now we don't need to fill it all out because we did set these as nullable. So we're just going to add a few things in here just to make sure that our insert statement is working. So let's go back here now, and to remember from our MySql stuff, the SQL for this is going to be insert into, and then the name of the table that we want to insert into, and then we're going to put parentheses, values, and then parentheses again, and the this will be a list of fields. And so if we look back here, let's just do title and body for now. So if we're going to do, you can do backticks if you want. Now keep in mind that these are backticks. They're above the tab key on an American keyboard. They are not single quotes, so do not mess that up, otherwise it will not work. So we're going to do that, and then in its place in the values, we don't want to just put our values directly in there because that would represent the ability to do SQL injection. Instead, what we're going to do is 2 question marks for now. Actually, you know what? Let's do, instead of that, let's do a colon, and we're going to do title, and then we're going to do colon body. Okay, and then what we want to do is have our bind array here, and we want to give these the key of title, and that title is going to be new article or something like that, and the body is going to be, let's just for now put article body here, and we're going to make that super short. And then the way we want this to work is we want to be able to do our DB execute and pass in our SQL and our bind just like that. So this is what we want to do, and we want it to be able, when we hit this page, we want it to insert that article for every time. That's what's going to be the goal of this. So let's go back to our database class now. We need to actually make the execute work. So the way that what we're going to do here, we're going to do a couple things. First thing we're going to do is reset some of these that may have been changed in a previous, maybe in a previous execution. So let's go ahead and say this. We'll do this $_results is equal to null, and we'll say this last insert ID is also equal to null. And then we'll do this error is equal to false. Okay, and then what we're going to do here is start the actual execution. So we're going to set up a statement variable here. So just do stmt, and that's going to be equal to this skinny arrow underscore dbh. That'll be our database handler. So that is our database handler connection that we set up. And then we're going to do run the prepare function, which will prepare a statement, and I got a typo there. So this prepare is built into PDO, and so this is taking the PDO connection, which is stored in our DBH property up here, and right here, and you can see that happens in the constructor where we are setting our PDO object right there. So now we can use this PDO prepare method, and what it prepares is our SQL statement. So we just pass our SQL statement directly into that. The next thing that we want to do is we want to execute this, but we're going to go ahead and do an if statement here, and we're going to say if statement, and then that statement now is set up, and it can actually do an execute function here, and that function is going to take our bound parameters. So we're going to pass this bind down into this, okay, just like that. The next thing that we're going to do is if you know what, let's just do the negative of this. So if not statement execute, then what we're going to do here is we are going to set this error equal to true to let us know that there was an error on the execution. And then at the very end of this, what we're going to do after that if statement is we're going to set statement equal to null. Okay, and then what we're going to do is we are going to return this. Okay, return this. So let's save that now, and let's go back to our page here and refresh, and no news might be good news. So let's go back to our database now and hit browse, and of course now we can see that we don't have any errors, and it inserted a row into our database, and the row that it inserted was this first one here. The only thing we added was the title and the body, and you can see that that worked just fine because the title is set to new article and the body is set to article body. So that's awesome. We already have a working execute command. And in fact, if I go back and we refresh again, it's going to add a second one. So every time we add one, there'll be a new row here. So that's how we can run and execute a raw query statement, and it also binds our parameters there so we don't have to worry about that. Okay, so the next thing that we want to be able to do though is this doesn't allow us, so this sort of thing here, this execute, this will only execute SQL statements. This won't return any sort of results. This will only execute like an insert, an update, or a delete, or something like that, or any sort of raw query that's not a select. So what we want to be able to do is actually get results back as well. So underneath this method, let's go ahead and create another method that we're going to call public function query. And this query is going to have the same parameter signature as our execute. So we'll do that. And what we want to be able to do here is let's see, we're pretty much doing the same thing here. I don't want to copy code. Let's do it with copying code and see if there's a way for us to clean it up afterwards. So let's just go ahead and copy everything in this execute command here. And our query command is going to be very similar, but it's going to be a little bit different here. And the reason it's going to be a little bit different is because we need to here, well, we can leave this if we want. So if it's not successful, then we're going to set an error. But if it is successful, we're going to add an else statement here. And we're going to set up the row count, and we're going to do our results as well. So we could say this row count is equal to statement row count, and that's a built-in PDO thing. And then we're also going to say this last insert ID is going to be equal to statement last insert ID. That's also built in PDO, so that if we do insert undefined method, did I spell that wrong? Last, let me see here. Oh, well, we can't get that from the statement. We actually got to get this from the this $_dbh. So that comes from the database handler, actually, not the statement. So that's how we can get the last inserted ID. And so if it's an insert statement, we can get the last inserted ID and set that, and we'll have access to that. Sometimes you need that. The next thing that we want to do is we are going to set the results equal to a fetch all. And so in that case, there's two different ways we can do this. Later on, well, let's just do it the simple way for now. We'll add more functionality later. So we'll do this underscore results, and we're going to set that equal to the statement. And then on the statement, we're going to run the fetch all, and we're going to pass in this fetch type just like that. And so now this is going to do the PDO fetch object. So if you look up here in our fetch type, it's this PDO fetch object. So that is what actually gets sent into this fetch all, and that will do the fetch all and set that to the results. And then let's see, I guess for now that's good. We're setting the statement back to null and returning this. So this function, this method is nearly identical to the execute, with the exception of we needed to do additional stuff with the statement before it was destroyed. And we also needed to do the row count, last insert ID, and set up the results. So this query is what we're going to use when we do select statements. I don't like having this functionality kind of split up and copied. So maybe what we'll do is let's just go ahead and set another protected property here. And this protected property will be the statement. Okay. And then what we can do is in our execute here, we can actually do something like this where we say this $_ is equal to this, and then we can also this $_ statement execute, and then we're not going to do the statement null right here. Instead what we'll do I think is, yeah, we'll skip that because that's bad news. And then what we'll do is instead of doing all of this again in our query, we can actually get rid of this. So we're going to refactor this a little bit. We don't need to do this because we're going to do this in execute. So instead what we'll do is we're going to say that we're going to run this execute, and we're going to pass in our SQL and binds directly into there. And then that is going to return this, so we don't need to do anything there. But and I got binds here, so that should be like that. And then we don't need this statement because it's going to be set up here, the preparation and the execution of that. And so what we can do instead is we can just check if not. So get rid of this. We're going to say if not this $_ error, and then we can get rid of this else right here, get rid of this, and we can get rid of this here. And then what we're going to do is take these 3 lines and we're going to move them up into this if statement here. And then we can get rid of this. So what we're going to do is basically run the execute function when we do the query, but we're going to have to change this to this _ statement and this _ statement. And so let me just, all right, so now that I've refactored this should work. Let me show you what the reason that I did this. One, a lot of the functionality was exactly the same between these two. But we just needed to do extra stuff with our query method. So we can actually call the execute function first, and it will do all of this stuff, and it returns this. And then what we can do is we can say, hey, this, if there's not an error, because this will set the error to true if there is an error, then we can get the row count and the last insert ID and the results from this statement like this. And that was set up in the execute function because instead of just creating a local scoped variable there, we set it equal to this _ statement, which we added right here. So now we have that statement available to us. And the only other thing that I would say is it would be nice to go ahead and clean that statement up, but I think that's going to cause us some problems. So for now, let's go ahead and leave that and test this a little bit. So if I go back to the blog now, instead of using this execute, I'm going to go ahead and comment this out, and let's just create another SQL statement here, and let's say this is going to be equal to let's just do a select star from articles. So this will get all of our articles, and then what I want to do is do db query, and we're just going to pass that SQL in there. There's nothing to bind, so we're not going to send a second parameter there. But now that we have this query, we need to get the results, right? So that the results that are set up in this query are a protected thing. So let's, underneath this query method here, let's create a getter for that. So public function get, and let's just call it results, okay, like this. And what this is going to do is just return this _ results like that. Okay, so now what we can do is we can go back to our blog controller, and we can, because this query just returns this, we can actually start to chain other methods on. So in fact, what we can do here is we can say articles is equal to db query, and then before there we can just do another skinny rocket or whatever you want to call it there, just a small arrow, and now we can say results, and that is actually going to return the results of our query. So let's go ahead, and below that let's do our h dump and die, and let's dump and die our articles here, articles, and we'll save that and go back to our browser and hit refresh, and now we have a problem where it's saying too few arguments are passed to our query function. So let's go and see if we can figure out what that is all about. And that is because we didn't send the bind along, and we didn't set a default. So we need to set that to for a default, an empty array there. So let's try that again. And now you can see that we have returned to us an array with 2 elements in it. Each element is an object, okay? And that is an object because we told it when you fetch this, fetch it as a PDO fetch object type, and that returns a standard class here. And you can see that we have now at our disposal 2 of these. The first one has an ID of 1, and the title is new article, and the and now the body is article body. And then we have a second one with an ID of 2 and a title and a body. So now we have 2 elements that are returned from our database with our query object and our results. So that's perfect. Now we can insert, update, and we can actually do everything that we want to be able to do in our database with these 2 methods. Now we did set up the last insert ID, and we also did row count. So we want to go ahead and create some getters for those so that we can get that information as well. So let's do public function rows, or let's just do let's call that count maybe. One second, let me see what I called it in my, yeah, we can just do count here, I think. And this will just return this underscore row count like that. The next thing that we want to do is be able to, so we got a getter for our result, a getter for our count, and now let's do one for our last insert ID. So let's do public function last insert ID, and that will just return this last insert ID. Okay, and then I guess we should also do one for error, possibly. Do we need one for error? I don't think we need one for error, so we'll just stick with results, count, and last insert ID. And so what we could do is in our blog controller now, we have our results set to these results, but what we could do is we could say query is equal to, and we're just going to pass this part here, okay, and then this part with the results would just be query results at that point. But we can also do the count, and that is going to be equal to our query, and we created a method called count on there. So let's go and dump and die that count variable now instead of the articles. And now if we refresh, we see we get an integer of 2 because there are 2 rows in there. Let's also try out the last insert ID and see what that is all about. I don't think that's going to work necessarily, so I'm just going to leave that set to count just to check it. Okay, and we get a string of 0, and that's because we didn't just insert one. But well, I guess we'll test that. So let's go. Let me check. I might have a problem here with the execute, and that is we're setting the last insert ID inside this query, but the better place to probably put this is in the execute function. And so let's do that after this if statement here. And we'll just do an else right here. And inside that else, we're gonna put the last insert ID there. So now let's test that out. Let's go back to, let's go back to our blog controller. And let's comment out all of this stuff here and uncomment the lines that we had that inserts the article here. And then let's set this to a query here or something. And then let's say last ID is equal to query get our last insert ID. And then let's do an H dump and die of last ID. So this execute should set that if we did this correct. So we hit refresh and now we get back 3. So if we look at our database and we refresh here, we do have a third one here that is set to ID 3. So now we know our last insert ID. And in fact, if I go back and refresh this, you're going to see this go up every time I refresh. And that is because every time I refresh, it is adding another row to our database there and getting that last insert ID. Awesome. Well, guys, I think now that we have that done, our database class is for the most part done. We are going to add a little more functionality to this later after we finish our models so that we can actually take the results of these and then set those not only to a standard PHP class, but rather we can actually set those up as objects from a model object, for example, a user or an article object, and then we have access to methods within those objects right there on those results. And so that is a little bit more that we'll add to these database, this database class later on when we get there, but I didn't want to overcomplicate this for right now. Now, as it stands, if you're not going to be using models in your classes or anything like that, you guys can take this DB class and just use it on any one of your projects. And just remember that the difference between execute and query is that execute is to execute some sort of SQL query that's not going to return any results, but query you'd want to use if you're going to do a select statement. So in the next video, what we'll do is we're going to add a few more methods to this DB class that allows us just a little bit of a nicer way so that we don't have to write out entire things like this, statements like this. We're going to do an abbreviated way of doing it. So we'll create a method for inserting and a method for updating. And let's see, insert and update. Yeah, we'll create a method for insert and update that we can simplify, and we don't have to run this execute with a raw query. We can update and all of that just with a little bit simpler of a method. We could continue to use this, obviously, but we don't want to have to type out necessarily a full SQL statement every time we want to insert something or update something in the database. So we're going to make that a little easier on ourselves in the next video. So let's jump over now and just push what we have currently to GitHub. So I'll do a git status here, and you can see that we have 2 modified files. So I'll do git add dot. And now if we do a git status, you can see the things that have been staged but not committed. So let's go ahead and commit those with git commit -m. And then we'll give this a commit message of execute and query methods. We'll hit enter and then we'll do a git push. The next thing that I want to do is just go ahead and check out main, and I'm going to do a git merge v14. Now you guys don't have to create these branches if you don't want to. I'm just separating them out by branch so that you guys can see where we left off after each video. So if you go to GitHub, there's a link in the description below. You can see exactly where I left off at the end of this video on video 14, and make sure that your code matches mine if you have any sort of errors. Alright guys, so that's it for this video, and I will see you tomorrow in the next video, Lord willing.